Swatan TV present the news with the help of Lot Binder, Harjeet Sandhu, Uday Nayak, Bernadette Young, Sunil Kalia.
I would like to acknowledge that we have gathered on Treaty 6 lands, and the Métis people of Alberta share deep connections with it. I want to thank you all for taking time for this important discussion and question and answers, which allows Alberta NDP to share our work, our key plans, our promises with ethnic community through your media, and keep them tuned in for what matters to them. Friends, I'm joined here by some of our MLAs and candidates for the upcoming elections, upcoming provincial elections in 2023.
For coming out today to hear a little bit about what we have to say, and of course to ask us a number of questions, which I'm sure you all have. We know that community media sources are incredibly important across this province, and in particular in and around Edmonton today, that you provide very important information to folks in your particular communities, and both geographically as well as culturally, and so we really appreciate the time that you take to come out today. We are heading into an election, you probably heard, and the conversations around the election and what are going to be front of mind issues are starting to heat up a little bit out there. And so I wanted to have this opportunity, I'm grateful for this opportunity, to talk a little bit about what is a priority for us here in Alberta's NDP, and what we've been hearing from Albertans too, because that's a lot about what drives what is so critically important to us. So, all of us here around at this table, and many of our other candidates, have in fact been out door knocking and talking to folks in their communities, in their neighborhoods, at their homes, about the issues that matter most to them. And so there's been a few things that have really kind of filtered up to being, from folks, to being the big priorities. And it just happens to work out that these are things that we've identified as being very important for politicians to be taking seriously in going into the next election. So the first one, of course, is healthcare. I'm sure that there's not a soul in this room that doesn't spend time talking about the quality of our healthcare system and their concerns about whether healthcare will be there for them or their loved ones when they need it. And that conversation has taken place with respect to, of course, access to family medicine. It's taken place with respect to ambulance response times. It's taken place with respect to wait times in terms of surgery and ER, as well as in terms of the fact that we don't seem to have enough hospital beds here in the city of Edmonton and other parts of this province. So this is a priority for Alberta's NDP. And as many of you may know, today we made an announcement where, first of all, Rod, in his role as critic for infrastructure, revealed what many of us had already suspected, which was at the South Edmonton Hospital that our government announced in 2017 would be built, has been indefinitely delayed. When we announced it, we had committed that construction would start in 2020 and that it would be completed in 2026. Subsequent to that, the UCP delayed it and said, no, construction will start in 2023. Well, here we are. It's 2023, and construction has not started. I don't know if you've been, any of you here, to the site of that where that hospital is supposed to be. Great big field. Nothing going on there. And now if you go to government websites, the deadline for construction commencing as well as for construction completing has been completely eliminated. And so they've obviously indefinitely delayed it. The last time we had a hospital built here in Edmonton was in, I believe, 1988. And 35 years ago, if my math is roughly correct. And that was the Grey Nuns. And folks here will know, many of you will know, that the Grey Nuns is already stretched. And and the city, of course, has grown, as have many, many communities around this city, dramatically since 1988. So we will actually get that project back on track. We will be making announcements in the next few days around how we plan to redesign family medicine to make sure folks get access to a family doctor. And we will be engaging in a very ambitious recruitment and workforce development program to make sure that we have those frontline health care professionals, doctors, nurses, mental health therapists, pharmacists, and all those other folks who can be out there to provide the services that folks need. The other thing we hear a lot about from Albertans is affordability. We're hearing about how it's getting more and more expensive to make ends meet at the end of each month when it comes to paying bills. The UCP allowed for and encouraged for insurance, car insurance, to shoot up. They allowed for utilities and the cost of your utilities to shoot up. They took the cap off tuition. We now have the highest, most expensive tuition in the country. We now have growing school fees again. All of these things add up to make life less affordable for regular families. And so what we will do is reverse these decisions and help families make ends meet when they're trying to plan for their future and provide for their families and loved ones. The other thing we hear about from folks is the jobs and the economy. They want to know that there is capable leadership driving economic growth that will create sustainable jobs now and into the future, that will attract and grow opportunities for professionals and those kinds of opportunities in good old-fashioned industrial type jobs that have helped build this city. And so we are going to be focusing on that. We have a very detailed plan, or multiple detailed plans on how to grow the economy and maintain and grow jobs on our Alberta's Future website, albertasfuture.ca. And I'd urge you to take a look at those, and we can talk about some of the specific plans that are there if you have questions. Finally, as a result of the excellent work done by Jasveer and also by David Shepherd and other members of our caucus, we have moved forward to develop a pretty robust anti-racism plan here in Alberta. Folks here will remember that when we were in government, I had established a Premier's Council, Anti-Racism Council, to give advice on how to reduce and eliminate racism here in Alberta. That group of folks produced a report which then sat collecting dust on the desk of the Premier with almost none of those recommendations acted on. We will take that report, we will dust it off, we will compare it to the report and the consultations that generated that report that were led by Jasveer and David and others, and we will take action to move forward to combat racism in all its forms throughout our province. And I'm happy to talk about the details of that, but certainly part of it will be exploring, strengthening the Human Rights Commission, providing more opportunities for small community groups to engage in anti-racism work within their community through grants. So those are some of the things that are top of mind for us that we think are really important for building Alberta and setting it on the course for a bright future, one that recognizes that we are, without question, one of the most optimistic, diverse, young, well-educated groups of folks in any part of the country. Let me just say, in terms of the taxes, I mean, I do hear you. I mean, it was ironic. The UCP ran on keeping taxes low, and then the first thing that happened was Jason Kenney cut the indexation of tax brackets, which is something that he had fought for as head of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation for like 25 years in his career. He used to call it the worst tax ever, a hidden tax, when your tax brackets aren't indexed with the cost of inflation. So he stopped that from happening, and people immediately started paying more taxes. So yeah, it was something that it was the first promise he broke, and we have been pushing ever since that he put that back in, that he put the indexation back in place in order to stop people from having to pay more tax. And they finally did it a couple months ago, but it was only after collecting all that money from folks like you throughout that period of time. So I think that was not very authentic or honest with the people of Alberta. The other thing, you talk about utilities, I agree. We had a cap on the rate on electricity. You're paying about more than twice that now because the UCP removed the cap. And so now regular families are paying more. And I think that that's unfair because people don't have a choice over whether they pay utilities and have the electricity on and have their houses warm. So, at that time, we were very focused on supporting Albertans and having their backs as we were going through, an economic challenge caused by that drop in the price of oil. Now, one of the other things that we did when we were in government was we stabilized the unending drama in healthcare and started getting things moving on the right track. We also finally got some predictable, stable funding happening in education so that our class sizes were getting smaller and there was more support there. We also took tuition from being the most expensive in the country and making it the second least expensive. And if we had stayed in power, it would be the most affordable in the country by a long shot by now. So if we get a chance to be in government again, we are going to focus on restoring the quality of the public health care that folks have access to when they need it. We're going to focus on rebuilding our public education system so that our kids can have the quality of education that we know they need in order to succeed in the future. We're going to get our tuition back down so that post-secondary is affordable and accessible, not just to our kids, but to all of us, because let's face it, lots of us are going to have to go back to school more than once in our lives. And right now, it's pretty unaffordable. And we're going to work very hard to grow the economy in a sustainable, forward-looking, progressive, diversified kind of way where we continue to be an oil and gas province, but we are also creating and growing in other sectors so that we're more resilient to the ups and downs of the international price of oil.
जो कि इस वेले दूसरी टर्म ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਨੇ ਥੋੜੇ ਮਹੀਨਿਆਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਦੁਬਾਰਾ ਚੋਣਾਂ ਹੋਣ ਜਾ ਰਹੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਜਿਵੇਂ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਕਿ ਅਲਬਰਟਾ ਦੀਆਂ ਮਈ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੇ ਫਿਰ ਨੋਮੀਨੇਟ ਹੋਏ ਨੇ ਤੀਸਰੀ ਟਰਮ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਕੋਸ਼ਿਸ਼ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ ਪੁੱਛਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਕਿ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਪਿਛਲੀਆਂ 2 ਟਰਮਾਂ ਕੀ ਇਹੋ ਜਿਹਾ ਕੀਤਾ ਜੋ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਫਿਰ ਵੋਟਾਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪਾਓਗੇ ਰੌਡ ਵੈਲਕਮ
Always a pleasure to be on Watan TV with you. Sat Sri Akal to all the viewers who are watching us at home.
You've been MLA for 2 terms and you're trying for the 3rd term. What do you think? Why people should vote, your constituents vote for you for 3rd term?
Well, in general, it's because I've always approached this position as being someone who's very humble and sincere and getting the work done that my constituents need. And that has always been a focus of mine. But specifically for the Punjabi community, I can honestly say that when the Punjabi community comes to me with an issue, I give it my full attention and I get the job done. And people out there know my reputation. They know that as not even being a Punjabi, not even being a Sikh, I have done more for the Sikh Punjabi community in the province of Alberta than even other Sikh Punjabi politicians in the past. I'm very proud of that track record, and it's because at the end of the day, I'm a human being just like everybody else. I'm here to represent everybody and help everybody get the job done.
How approachable are you?
Well, people who know me, they know that at any time you can come to my office. I'm always willing and available. If you see me out in public, I'm always willing to stop and chat with people. For me, I'm here to serve the people. And I'm a politician of the people, for the people, and making sure that we get people's concerns addressed.
Election is coming soon. Have you started door knocking?
Indeed, we've been door knocking, we've been making phone calls, we've been collecting volunteers, putting a volunteer strategy together, doing all those things. So I want to welcome people from the community. If you want to get involved in my campaign, all you have to do is reach out and we can get you involved. We desperately need people to sign up for a lawn sign as we get closer to the election, and that's an easy process. You can contact me through social media and I can pass on the links for all of that. let's make sure that we keep Edmonton Ellerslie orange, and let's elect an NDP government so that we can get more things done in the next year.
They have actually been in government for 4 years, and I would argue they could have probably moved on it a little bit before that. But we have certainly been hearing a lot about it from folks, and the nature of the conversation has changed a bit because now we're in a place where there's a shortage of so many professionals across a whole range of professions within Alberta, and yet we know there are so many foreign trained professionals who, for a variety of reasons, are not getting their training recognized, and those foreign credentials are not being recognized. So that is absolutely a fundamentally important issue that we have heard about from people and that we are talking about. Folks in our caucus have been having meetings all across the province, talking with people about this problem and trying to get a sense of the scale and the scope of the problem, as well as as some of the different strategies for eliminating the problem. So we have met with business leaders, we have met with post-secondary folks, we have met with newcomer advocate groups, we've met with immigration groups, we have met with, pardon me?
Community leaders.
Community leaders within these areas, with the foreign nurses group. We probably, I don't know how many meetings there have been right now, but
We have one tomorrow.
yeah, there's another one coming up tomorrow. So we are definitely talking to people about the nature of the problem in order to help develop a solution. Between us, the reality is that this is a problem that has plagued Alberta for well over a decade. This was a problem that people were talking about, 15 years ago. And it comes down in large part to a lot of the professional associations being very slow to recognize and do the work to streamline their approach to recognizing and credentialing foreign-trained professionals and foreign-trained working people. My view is that we have now at the point, given the crisis in not only healthcare, but in our shortage of so many folks within our workforce, the time has come to move more aggressively and ambitiously vis-a-vis the professional associations that have been moving maybe a bit slower than they should have been in order to get recognition for these credentials. And where there's still daylight or difficulty between what we want to have recognized and what these professional associations think are appropriate, then we need to be finding streamlined post-secondary, short, fast means of getting people credentialed. None of this going back to school for another 6 or 7 years in order to have that credentialing recognized. This is a profound loss of economic opportunity that we are experiencing across almost every sector of our economy. The opportunity for media grants, small media grants, through the Cultural Industries Fund. We're looking at the model that the federal government has and other provinces have as a possible.
I'm just asking to buy adverts.
I know, but I understand that, but okay, but I'm just going to answer that. Okay. So because that is what that is certainly what they are doing, and there's an opportunity there for that. And so we're going to take a look at what those are structured as. In terms of the NDP buying ads, I have to say, when we're not in government, we don't actually have that much money, and we don't buy advertising in the Edmonton Journal. Like, I swear to God, you will not find an ad in the Edmonton Journal or CBC from the Alberta NDP. We really don't buy advertising as the NDP caucus. We don't have the money. We will buy advertising now, going towards the election. That will start to happen because we've been fundraising for 4 years, and as we get to an election, we will have do some advertising. But of course, we don't have the big donor fundraisers that the third party groups that the UCP has, so we don't usually get to buy as much. But we certainly will be, trying to do that as much as we can. But apart from, like, we only have very little MLA budgets. We don't have access to government funding the way the UCP does. Like, they have, like, probably $1,000 to $10,000 for every $1 we have because of the role that we have. So that's kind of the issue. So we just don't have that, like, I don't have enough money in but I'd have to fire a staff person to buy advertisements in everybody's thing as an MLA. But certainly as government, we're looking at different ways to support small community media folks. In terms of Black History Month, as you know, we were the ones to declare it and to start promoting it. And it was our intention to see it reflected in the curriculum so that there would be sort of less discretion and less having schools that were just ignoring it, so that in fact it was part of the curriculum and folks were actually teaching kids about it. That was always our plan. And that's part of our anti-racism plan too. So you will see more of that if we get into government. We believe very strongly that those kinds of things need to be included in our education curriculum. And then finally, in terms of education and hiring, I absolutely agree with you. That is another thing that we talk about in the anti-racism paper that we have put out. And so it comes to making sure that we're recruiting into schools in a way that reflects diversity. Also make sure that all of like our school boards and others have programs that are designed to ensure diversity in hiring. And then finally, we have to make sure that school boards have the money to hire new teachers. Because one of the problems that's happening right now is that they're actually losing teachers. They're not hiring any teachers right now.
I have seen the political scene for the last 50 years here, Honorable Otley starting and taking over. I remember 1993 when King Ralph Klein took over, cuts. 32 seats from red here to here, Liberals, and then blue the rest of the seats, King Ralph Klein got. And they both have wallets out, cuts. And the philosophy is still going on. I remember in 1993, Greynon Hospital was going to be closed, and more than 100,000 people in Melrose, I was one of them, rallied, keep it open. And now you took over and you are saying that there's going to be new hospital here. I have one question, I'll be brief. One question, just that's the philosophy, I believe. But post knee and hip surgery, there is only one clinic in Edmonton, Northgate, shopping mall. Why is that? Why not in South Edmonton as well? Please look into it and see if you form a government and we hopefully have a new because the people who go through surgery and they have to travel all the way to north just for one clinic. And the last question.
Okay.
You have urban votes. What is happening in rural votes? What are you feeling? What is the feel in rural votes? Because that is the vote that's going to decide.
I'd actually thought that there was a clinic at the ALEC, but I'll happily look into it, and we'll certainly make. I hear what you're saying. Edmonton's a big city, and something as needed as that should be more equitably available. So we'll certainly keep that top of mind should we get that opportunity. As far as the campaigning to voters across Alberta, I like not to distinguish between urban voters and rural voters and do that whole thing. I don't think that we need to campaign and divide. I don't think a campaign of division and conflict is helpful. I think that folks in rural Alberta are worried about their health care. They're worried. We've got something like 15 rural emergency rooms that are shut down right now. We've got whole rural communities that have no access to a family doctor at all. We have rural communities who have tremendous concerns around the quality of their education. So I think there's fundamental values that really do unite us on a lot of fronts. So the other thing we've been doing is we've been talking about a big throw to rural Alberta, which is to move ambitiously on the issue of rural internet and rural broadband, because so many communities across this province do not have functional access to rural broadband, and that serves as a tremendous barrier to their economic development as well as their cultural and social development. And so we rolled out at albertasfuture.ca, just remember that, albertasfuture.ca, a very detailed rural broadband proposal, which is actually considerably more detailed than what the government itself, that as responsible citizens of the world, we as Albertans, just as all Canadians and everybody else, have to work to reduce our emissions. And I think that that presents a tremendous opportunity for Albertans. And it has to be a problem that we approach from that perspective, as an opportunity. And we can do that by setting ambitious targets for ourselves, like emissions caps, and by working very, very carefully and strategically to invest in green technology that will help reduce emissions. What won't work is setting unrealistic caps, like what the federal Liberals rolled out last year about this time, that will essentially drive everybody away from making those investments, because in frustration they will think it's not doable. What also won't work is having a provincial government that takes what is a very important economic development tool and obligation and turns it into a petty political fight for their own purposes. By doing that, we leave Albertans behind. And that's what this UCP government has been doing for the last 18 months. They've had superficial, pointless political fights with Ottawa, instead of rolling up their sleeves, developing a Made in Alberta plan, and then making sure Ottawa shows up at the table to incent those investments, to create those jobs, and to create more opportunity for Albertans in the oil and gas sector, as well as in other energy producing sectors of our economy. But certainly collecting the data provincially is really important. Most other provinces do collect that data. And we've long since been advocates of a system called open data, so that if we are actually collecting race-based data, we would be very happy to share that with the federal government and with the municipal government, and actually to work together where we have shared responsibilities and we are seeing that the data shows us that the services are not being are being delivered in a way that is either overtly or systemically discriminatory, and in this case, racist. So I think that even though there is, different multiple levels of government, not to mention the private sector, to be quite honest, private sector is a big player in all of this too, and we know that issues around racism also exist within the private sector. So collecting data is a starting point, and sharing it with more and more places should be a critical part of that data collection, so that we can use it in our conversations with the private sector, with municipal, with federal, with all those places. In terms of the sort of issue of racism as a subset of promoting diversity and inclusion, I don't think it's an either-or situation. I think that a lot of the principles around inclusion and celebration of difference actually apply across the board with a number of different groups that suffer from discrimination. That being said, when you're talking about promoting anti-racism, there's a piece of it around education. And when you're doing that, I think that it needs to be very much focused on that form of discrimination. So when you're doing the education, so you can be talking about in our schools about different religions, you can be talking about the history of different cultures and different races. So because we know that understanding and familiarity are probably the single biggest tools to use against discrimination and or racism. Because again, as you rightly say, racism is a subset of discrimination. I can be discriminated against as a woman, right? I mean, we all know there's a whole bunch of different types of discrimination. But familiarity and understanding of our differences is how we start down the road of eliminating those forms of discrimination, and in this case, racism. I very much, I'm very sorry to hear that you've been waiting that long for the hernia operation. That seems way too long. And what I will say is that what we know has happened, like, yes, of course there was COVID, and that did make it harder for healthcare to be delivered, not only here in Alberta, but across the country. Let's, be clear about that. That's a, let's be fair about our assessment. But in addition, things have become harder here for a variety of reasons. One, this UCP government, once you take away their episodic funding for COVID relief, which is not something that goes from year to year or that can be planned on from year to year, they actually cut, taking into account inflation and population growth, they cut $1.7 billion out of our healthcare system. So if wait times get longer and it gets harder to find a doctor and it gets harder you have to wait longer for an ambulance, no one should be surprised. You don't take $1.7 billion out of healthcare and expect it not to have a result. In addition, they of course commenced a huge fight with doctors, ripped up their agreement, and I'm still hearing from doctors who said, well, yeah, they finally renegotiated an agreement, 6 months before an election, but I'm done. I've quit my practice. I'm moving out west. I'm done practicing. And so that's a real thing that happened. And then of course the fact that they, announced to nurses in the end of 2019 that they were going to fire 1,000 of them, and told other healthcare professionals that 5 or 6 or 7,000 of them would lose their jobs. So those kinds of things result in people going, oh, you don't want us here? All right, I guess I'll go somewhere else. And so the problem here has been made worse by the UCP's management. And so the answer then is to restore some of that funding and to reestablish a better relationship with those frontline healthcare professionals. And when it comes to dealing with wait times in particular, there is potentially room for targeted sort of clinics that would do certain types of operations. But we know from the past that roughly 8 or 9 years ago, we had a publicly delivered hip and knee program that was run out of the Royal Alec here in Edmonton, and a privately one run out of Calgary by a UCP donor. And one cut wait times. And the privately run one that was still publicly, like no one had to pay out of pocket for it, but it was privately run. Well, the public had to bail it out, and it didn't work. So this plan that the UCP has, again, to give more money to the same people is not good for Albertans' healthcare. In terms of how the campaign will run, I mean, it's an interesting conversation. The reality is you can write up 4 propositional positive things and say 1 negative thing, and the media will cover the 1 negative thing, and they won't cover the other 3 or 4 propositional ones, except, of course, the media in here, who will, of course, write nothing but all the propositional stuff that we're talking. And I'm sure all of you have written, 20 articles over Alberta's future, which, by the way, if I could use this opportunity to plug albertasfuture.ca, where we currently have about 10 or 11 very detailed policy papers about what we would do going forward. And we've been rolling them out with a lot of research and a lot of consultation over the course of the last 18 to 24 months. And so I urge you guys to go and look at those and write about them, because that is what a positive campaign looks like. We've just had a heck of a time getting people to pay attention to it. What we will do, though, is we will contrast with the policy ideas of the other government and the other party and their record. So I don't want to get into personal attacks on Danielle Smith or any of her MLAs. I do, however, want to talk about their record and their policy.
ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਰਿਹਾਨਨ ਹੋਇਲ ਇਸ ਵੇਲੇ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ। ਐਡਮਿੰਟਨ ਸਾਊਥ ਦੀ NDP ਦੀ ਨੋਮੀਨੇਸ਼ਨ ਜਿੱਤ ਕੇ ਚੋਣਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਤਿਆਰ ਨੇ, ਤੇ ਚੋਣਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਸ਼ਾਇਦ ਥੋੜਾ ਜਿਹਾ ਰਹਿ ਗਿਆ ਹੁਣ। ਆਓ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ। ਰਿਹਾਨਨ, It's almost 3 months, 4 months left.
Correct. There's 3 months. The election's in May, on May 29th of 2023. I'm running in Edmonton South for the Alberta NDP. We are doing very well. We need to connect with more folks, and we're excited to meet as many people as possible.
Yeah, you've experienced, in municipal election just not long ago, so that will probably benefit you.
Yes, so I ran in 2021 for the municipal election in Ward EP Kokani Piotsi. It was once Ward 9, Ward 10 combination. I came in just second by 0.18% of the vote. It was the closest in history. We had a very strong campaign. It was really well supported. And I want to thank any of the viewers here that would have supported my campaign. Thank you for your support. I don't take any vote for granted and hope to get your support this time round here.
I'm sure you must have started door knocking already.
Oh, we are at the doors. We've got my team out of the doors pretty much almost every day. We're working hard to connect with people and make sure that we get to hear what matters to you. What issues are important to you so that we can represent you well, and that I, as your MLA, future MLA, can represent you really well.
Great. So what are you hearing at the doors?
You know, some of the issues that we're hearing in the riding, people are very much concerned about the healthcare system. In the riding, they want to get that hospital built. We're hearing issues on jobs in the economy. That's a big one as well. We've got inflation and how we're going to solve some of these issues, as well as education and the school systems in Edmonton South. So those are some. We're hearing many. But once again, if any of you have ideas or suggestions, I want to hear. Please reach out to me.
Yeah, once you have, I don't think there's a campaign office yet, but once the rate is dropped, so you will have an office. So we will be following you.
Thank you. There will be an office in May, and we welcome everyone. So we want to build community. For me, my background is a community leader. I'm on the University Senate as a senator, publicly elected. I have been a business owner before and owned my own business. So I have an understanding. I am also an immigrant as well.